It was a cold, quiet night in the small town of Reedsville, Georgia. Hartley Correctional Facility, located just outside the town limits, stood like a fortress in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by tall fences topped with razor wire. Inside those walls, secrets were buried deep, but none as shocking as the one that was about to be revealed. Emma Clark, the respected and tough-as-nails warden of Hartley Correctional Facility, had built her entire career on discipline, strength, and control. She was known to run a tight ship, and the prison functioned smoothly under her watchful eye. For nearly 15 years, she had devoted herself to the job, rarely taking time off and almost never letting her personal life interfere with her duties. She was the kind of leader everyone admired, and her reputation was spotless, or so it seemed. But on the night of July 17, 2022, everything would change. It was the night Emma Clark was found dead in her office, a single gunshot wound to her chest. Her body lay slumped over her desk, blood pooling on the floor. Her death sent shockwaves through the prison staff, the inmates, and the entire town. But even more shocking were the dark secrets that began to surface in the days that followed. As news of her death spread, investigators quickly arrived on the scene. At first, it looked like a straightforward case, perhaps a disgruntled inmate or even a targeted hit by one of the many gangs that operated inside the prison walls. But the truth, as it would soon be uncovered, was far more complicated. Detective Sarah Lee, a seasoned investigator with the Reedsville Police Department, was assigned to lead the case. Sarah had seen her fair share of murders over the years, but something about this one didn't sit right with her. Emma Clark wasn't just any victim. She was a woman in power, someone who had enemies but also commanded respect. It didn't make sense that someone would want her dead, at least not without a reason. As Sarah began her investigation, she interviewed Emma's colleagues and the prison guards who worked under her. Most of them described her as professional and hardworking, but a few hinted at something more. Whispers about Emma's private life began to surface, and soon enough, a rumor spread like wildfire through the prison. Emma Clark had been having an affair with one of the inmates. At first, Sarah didn't believe it. How could a woman like Emma, who had built her entire career on being strict and by the book, engage in a relationship with an inmate? But as the days passed, more details began to emerge, and the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The inmate in question was Marcus Gray, a man serving time for armed robbery. He had been at Hartley for nearly 5 years and had gained a reputation for being charming and manipulative. Marcus wasn't like the other inmates. He was smart, charismatic, and knew how to get what he wanted. Over time, he had managed to form a bond with Emma, and their relationship had turned into something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. It started innocently enough. Marcus had been assigned to work in the warden's office as part of his prison job, filing paperwork and handling administrative tasks. He had always been respectful toward Emma, complimenting her on her leadership and offering to help whenever he could. Slowly, Emma began to let her guard down around him. She had been feeling lonely for some time, and Marcus's attention made her feel appreciated in ways she hadn't felt in years. Their relationship deepened as they spent more time together. It started with simple conversations, talking about their lives, their dreams, and their frustrations. Emma found herself confiding in Marcus, something she never did with anyone else. She told him about the pressures of her job, the long hours, and the loneliness that came with being in charge of a prison. Marcus, in turn, opened up about his own life, sharing stories of his past and the mistakes that had led him to prison. Soon their talks turned into something more intimate. Late at night, when the prison was quiet, they would meet in Emma's office. What had started as an emotional connection quickly turned physical, and Emma found herself in a secret, forbidden relationship with an inmate, a relationship that could ruin her career and destroy everything she had worked for if anyone found out. But Emma wasn't thinking about the consequences. She was blinded by the attention Marcus gave her, by the way he made her feel like a woman again, not just a warden. She believed that Marcus truly cared for her, that their connection was real. Little did she know that Marcus had his own reasons for getting close to her, reasons that had nothing to do with love. Marcus was a manipulator, and Emma was just another pawn in his game. He knew that getting close to the warden would give him power, influence, and access to things he never would have had as a regular inmate. He used Emma's feelings to his advantage, convincing her to let him bend the rules, to allow him privileges that other inmates didn't have. But Marcus had another secret, a secret that would turn their relationship into a nightmare. He was HIV positive, a fact he had kept hidden from everyone, including Emma. As their affair continued, Marcus knowingly infected her with the virus, sealing her fate without her even realizing it. It wasn't until weeks later that Emma discovered the truth. She had been feeling unwell, fatigued, and constantly sick. A visit to the doctor confirmed her worst fears: she had contracted HIV. Devastated and betrayed, Emma confronted Marcus in her office late one night. She demanded to know why he had done this to her, why he had kept the truth from her. Marcus, cold and unfeeling, simply shrugged. To him, Emma was nothing more than a means to an end. The confrontation turned violent. Emma, overcome with anger and heartbreak, threatened to expose their affair, to report Marcus and have him transferred to a high-security prison. But Marcus couldn't let that happen. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a gun that Emma had hidden in her desk and shot her in the chest. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the empty halls of the prison, but by the time the guards arrived, it was too late. Emma was dead and Marcus was nowhere to be found. As Detective Sarah Lee stood over Emma's body, she knew that this case was far from ordinary. The secrets that Emma had kept, the lies she had lived, and the man she had trusted had all led to this tragic, violent end. But as Sarah began to piece together the story of Emma's life and her relationship with Marcus, she realized that the truth was even darker than she had imagined. This was just the beginning of a case that would shake the town of Reidsville to its core. The discovery of Emma Clark's body was just the beginning of the nightmare that would unravel at Hartley Correctional Facility. As Detective Sarah Lee dove deeper into the investigation, the layers of deception, betrayal, and manipulation began to unfold, leaving everyone stunned. Emma's death had sent shockwaves through the small town of Reidsville, where she had been known as a tough but fair leader. For years, she had commanded respect from both the prison staff and the inmates. But now, the truth about her secret affair with Marcus Gray had begun to leak out. Rumors swirled around the town, and the prison guards whispered among themselves, unsure of who they could trust. For Sarah, the first major breakthrough came when she uncovered Emma's medical records. The revelation that the prison warden had been diagnosed with HIV was a shock. It raised questions about her personal life, questions that no one had expected to ask. How had she contracted the virus? Who was responsible? And, most importantly, what had driven her to keep such a dangerous secret hidden? The answer to those questions led back to Marcus Gray. Sarah's initial interviews with the prison staff painted a picture of Marcus as a charming, manipulative inmate. Many of the guards had noticed that he had become unusually close to Emma in the months leading up to her death. He had been given privileges that other inmates could only dream of: access to areas of the prison normally off-limits, leniency when it came to his behavior, and most notably his job in the warden's office. At first glance, Marcus seemed to be a model inmate. He had served time without causing any major incidents, and he had even managed to form friendships with some of the prison guards. But as Sarah dug deeper, she began to see the cracks in Marcus's facade. The more she learned about him, the more she realized that he had been playing a long game, one that Emma had unknowingly become a part of. The true extent of Marcus's manipulation came to light when Sarah uncovered a series of letters exchanged between him and Emma. The letters, hidden in Emma's office, revealed the depth of their relationship. In them, Emma had confessed her feelings for Marcus, writing about the loneliness she felt and how he had made her feel alive again. She had believed that their relationship was something special, something real. But Marcus's letters told a different story. His words were cold, calculated, and devoid of the affection that Emma had poured into hers. He wrote about how he was using their relationship to gain more control within the prison, how he saw Emma as nothing more than a pawn in his game. He mentioned his plan to use her for as long as he could, and then discard her once he had achieved his goals. The discovery of these letters confirmed Sarah's suspicions. Marcus had been manipulating Emma from the start. He had preyed on her vulnerabilities, taking advantage of her position of power and her need for companionship. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. In the days following Emma's death, Sarah received a tip from one of the prison nurses. The nurse, who had treated Marcus for a routine checkup months earlier, had noticed something odd in his medical records. Marcus had been diagnosed with HIV several years before, a fact that he had kept hidden from everyone, including Emma. It was a devastating revelation. Marcus had known about his condition, yet he had continued his affair with Emma, knowing full well that he was putting her life in danger. It was the ultimate betrayal, a calculated act of cruelty that had led to Emma contracting the virus and ultimately her death. Armed with this new information, Sarah confronted Marcus during one of her interrogations. He sat across from her in the small, windowless room, his face calm and composed. He showed no signs of remorse, no regret for what he had done. When Sarah brought up Emma's HIV diagnosis, Marcus simply smirked. "She knew the risks," he said coldly. "It wasn't my problem." Sarah felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she kept her composure. She knew that Marcus was trying to provoke her, to throw her off balance. But she wasn't going to let him win. She leaned in closer, her voice low and steady. "You used her," Sarah said, her eyes locked onto his. "You manipulated her, knowing full well what you were doing. And now she's dead because of you." Marcus shrugged, his smirk never fading. "People die all the time. It's just part of life." For Sarah, this was more than just another case. Emma had been a respected leader, a woman who had devoted her life to her job, only to be betrayed by someone she trusted. But more than that, Emma's death represented something deeper: how easily power and trust could be abused, how manipulation and deceit could lead to devastating consequences. The next step in Sarah's investigation was to determine how Marcus had managed to get his hands on the gun that killed Emma. The weapon had been traced back to Emma's personal collection, which meant that Marcus had either stolen it or been given access to it by Emma herself. Either way, it raised even more questions about the nature of their relationship and the extent of Marcus's influence over her. As Sarah continued to interview the prison staff, she began to uncover more disturbing details about the dynamics between Marcus and Emma. Some of the guards admitted that they had noticed strange behavior between the two but had chosen to look the other way. Others hinted that Marcus had managed to manipulate not just Emma, but several other staff members as well, using his charm and charisma to get what he wanted. The deeper Sarah dug, the more she realized that Marcus's web of lies and deceit extended far beyond his relationship with Emma. He had been playing everyone at the prison, using them to further his own goals. And now, with Emma dead, it was up to Sarah to bring him to justice. But as the investigation continued, Sarah began to suspect that there was more to the story than met the eye. The more she learned about Marcus, the more she realized that he wasn't working alone. There were others involved, people who had helped him cover up his crimes, who had turned a blind eye to his actions. The case was growing more complex by the day, and Sarah knew that the truth was still out there, hidden beneath layers of lies and deception. But one thing was clear: Marcus Gray was dangerous, and he wouldn't stop until he had gotten everything he wanted. As Sarah prepared to take the next steps in her investigation, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were still more secrets to uncover, more lies to expose. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, was the key to solving the case. As Detective Sarah Lee pressed forward with the investigation, the deeper she delved into Marcus Gray's life, the more unsettling the revelations became. Marcus wasn't just a manipulative inmate, he was a man with a dark past, a past that stretched far beyond his time at Hartley Correctional Facility. The discovery of Emma Clark's death had opened a Pandora's box of secrets, and each new piece of information seemed to point toward something even more sinister. Sarah's next move was to track down Marcus's previous records, particularly those from before his time at Hartley. What she found was chilling. Marcus had been incarcerated multiple times, each for a different crime, ranging from petty theft to violent assaults. But it wasn't his criminal history that stood out, it was the pattern of his behavior. In each case, Marcus had managed to manipulate and control people in positions of power, particularly women. The more Sarah learned about Marcus, the more she realized that Emma Clark was just the latest in a long line of victims. He had used his charm, his intellect, and his ability to read people to exploit their weaknesses. He had done it before, and he would do it again unless Sarah could stop him. One of Marcus's earlier crimes involved a female lawyer named Amanda Wilson. Sarah managed to locate Amanda, who had left the legal profession after a personal and professional breakdown. When Sarah visited Amanda at her home, she found a woman who had been shattered by her experience with Marcus. "I thought I could save him," Amanda said, her voice trembling as she recounted her time as Marcus's defense attorney. "He made me believe that he was innocent, that he had been wrongfully convicted. I thought I was helping a good man. But he was just using me." Amanda explained how Marcus had manipulated her, just as he had manipulated Emma. He had drawn her in, made her feel important, and then used her influence to gain privileges and sway over his case. By the time Amanda realized the truth, it was too late. Her reputation was ruined, and Marcus had moved on to his next target. Sarah listened carefully, taking notes as Amanda spoke. It was becoming clear that Marcus's ability to manipulate others went far beyond simple charm. He had a way of getting inside people's heads, of making them see him as a victim, even as he preyed on them. But there was one thing Amanda mentioned that piqued Sarah's interest. Marcus had once spoken about wanting something more. Amanda couldn't recall the details, but she remembered Marcus talking about a plan, something big, something that would change everything for him. It wasn't clear what he had meant at the time, but now, with Emma's death and the secret affair exposed, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Marcus had been working toward that plan all along. Back at the precinct, Sarah pored over every piece of evidence she had gathered so far. The letters between Marcus and Emma were key, but they were only part of the story. She needed more, something that would tie everything together, something that would prove that Marcus had not only manipulated Emma but had been planning her death all along. The forensics team had combed through Emma's office and living quarters, and they had found traces of Marcus's DNA in places that raised even more questions. It was clear that their affair had gone beyond mere office visits. Marcus had been in Emma's personal space and not just as an inmate. The discovery of his fingerprints on the gun that killed Emma was damning, but it still didn't answer the bigger question. Why? Why had Marcus orchestrated this entire affair? Why had he infected Emma with HIV, knowing it would destroy her? And why had he ultimately killed her? The answer, Sarah suspected, lay in something deeper, something more twisted than mere manipulation for personal gain. Marcus had destroyed Emma not just to escape prison or to exert control over her, but for something far more sinister. Was it revenge? Had Emma crossed a line with him? Or was Marcus simply someone who enjoyed the act of destruction, who thrived on the chaos he created in the lives of others? As Sarah pieced together the clues, she began to see a disturbing pattern. Marcus had never cared about escaping prison. That wasn't his goal. What he craved was power, the power to destroy lives, to control people, to make them bend to his will. And Emma, with her position as warden and her personal vulnerability, had been the perfect target. But there was something more. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Marcus was smart, too smart to leave obvious traces of his involvement. He had manipulated Emma, but why kill her so suddenly? Why now? The breakthrough came when Sarah received a call from one of the guards at Hartley Correctional Facility. The guard, who had always been wary of Marcus, had discovered something strange in Marcus's cell, a notebook hidden beneath his mattress filled with scribbled notes and drawings. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than ramblings, but as Sarah examined it more closely, she realized it was something far more sinister. The notebook contained detailed accounts of Marcus's interactions with Emma, his thoughts about her, and his plans for her downfall. It was clear that Marcus had been planning Emma's death for months, maybe even longer. But what shocked Sarah the most were the final entries, written just days before Emma's murder. "I control her now. She's mine. She'll never escape me." The words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Marcus hadn't just killed Emma, he had broken her, psychologically and emotionally, before ending her life. He had taken everything from her, and he had done it with a cold, calculating precision that left no room for doubt. With the notebook in hand, Sarah knew she had enough evidence to bring Marcus to trial. But as she prepared to move forward with the case, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Marcus was still dangerous, still capable of manipulation, and as long as he was alive, there would always be another victim. Sarah's job wasn't over yet. She had to ensure that Marcus Gray would never hurt anyone again. But as she stood outside the prison, looking at the imposing walls that had once held him, she knew that Marcus was already planning his next move. And she had to be ready. In the final days leading up to Marcus Gray's trial, Detective Sarah Lee felt a growing sense of unease. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Marcus remained eerily calm, his cold gaze following her every move. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with tension, but Marcus never wavered. His smirk hinted that his game wasn't over. The guilty verdict was swift, sentencing him to life behind bars. Yet, as Sarah left the courthouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus had won in his twisted way. He had destroyed Emma, and somewhere deep inside he still held power over them all.